Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be, around the city and across the state, coming to you from the heart of Chicago. It's E-Learning with Mr. Moeller. And on today's show, we're going to start our dive into the social sciences by taking a look at everybody's favorite, money. And so as we take a look at economics here, what we're going to be looking at is the study of wealth, your stuff, and really just whatever makes the world go round. And so, just a quick reminder, as we are watching here, you're going to want to be looking at that Unit 1 vocab list, and there's going to be an activity packet. It's going to go along with this video, so make sure you are checking that out, answering the questions, and doing everything that you need to do. So when we start off with economics here, we're going to start with a very basic premise. Economics is the study of your stuff. What do you need to survive? Food, water, basic cable. How do you get those things that you need to survive? How do we trade with each other? How does money work? How do we set up these complex international systems of trade? And what is going to actually make something valuable? All of these are great questions, and they're all in the realm of economics. So take a minute here and think a little bit about your stuff. Think about stuff you have that's old, stuff you have that's new, stuff that you think is new but actually might be very old. Think about what is your most important stuff. What could you not, live without? What do you use your stuff for? Who makes your stuff? And why do you choose to buy one thing over another thing? Well, these are all great questions that you start by looking at yourself. So what is economics? Well, economics in its very basic terms is the study of the production, distribution, and consumption of wealth. Put more basically, it's how a society and individuals value and distribute the scarce resources that are available. And so economics is going to look at your stuff. And so a couple of quick definitions, things we need to know. When we're talking about economics, we need a new language. And so we're going to use one term, material life, to refer to some changes in economics. Material life can be equated usually with technology. Material life is how we do things, using a hammer instead of your hand to pound something, using indoor plumbing instead of a hole in the ground to use the restroom. And so material life is work. It's the things we have to do every day in order to stay alive. It can be anything from riding in a car to cooking dinner. And so in history, and as well as today, we're always creating new tools, technologies to do these tasks more efficiently. And so work tools, from a hammer to the internet, have changed the way that we work. Consumer goods like deodorant change the way that we relate to each other and even the way that we smell. And so when we're looking at material life, we are looking at the tools and ways in which we do things. So material life is going to change with technology. A long time ago, you had an ox that pulled the plow. Now you have a gas-powered combine that is going to do the work of like 50 to 100 oxen. And so material life changes as technology changes. And think about communication. You used to have to write a letter, put it in the mail, and hope that it got to your person, almost like a message in a bottle. But now with Twitter and Facebook and all the other social medias that I can't even keep up with, you can instantaneously communicate with somebody more than just words, but a video, an image. And so that changes the way that you communicate with other people. Again, material life. Think about water. You probably have not gone to the well in some time in your life. Instead, we have water that comes from a tap, water in a bottle. And so even just how we get water that we need to live has changed radically over the course of human history. So now we'll depart from material life and look at the other half of the equation, which is what we call economic life. And economic life is quite simply how we buy and sell things. In the business, we call this market activity, but really all we're talking about is how I get what I want in exchange for money or something else. And so economic life is the relationships of the exchange of goods and services. Think about it this way. Economic life is the cashier at the cash register. It's the sellers and the buyers. It's also contracts, business agreements, like the one that you sign with corporate work study. And also rules and laws, things in place like minimum wage and others are all going to affect the way that we buy, sell, and work. And so a really great example of how economic life changes is just how we buy things and where. So in a lot of places in the world, there are still open air markets where you go to market and you purchase produce or whatever is there. And that is a very kind of direct idea of economic life. But you also know you have the grocery store. We have these thousands of products that are all created and put there for you. And so we just have to go to one place to get everything that we need, from meat to vegetables, to marshmallows to whatever that we need. But going even a step further, now you don't even have to just go to the grocery store. You can go online and purchase from an unbelievable catalog of items and have them delivered right to your door. And so the way in which we buy and sell things is changing radically. Also, too, think about how we pay for things, how we actually buy stuff. Well, back in the day, it used to be barter, right? I'll give you 6 swans in exchange for 15 ducks, or whatever the exchange rate of swans and ducks was. But then we moved to cash. In fact, most civilizations have had some sort of cash currency system. And today, I would argue a lot of you probably don't even carry cash anymore. People use credit cards, debit cards. Now they can even use their phone to pay for things. And so the way that we buy things has changed radically over time. And so what we're going to be looking at are the markets, the buyers and the sellers, the people who make products, the people that buy products, the people that sell products, where they sell those products, as well as the market systems behind them. If you ever think about where your bag of chips comes from, well, it probably involved dozens of people, from the farmer who grows the potato in the ground, to the factory that processes it, to the garbage man that's going to pick it up and throw it away. Market systems are very important, and the bigger market systems get, the more national and international our economic life is going to become. So we'll be talking about, various markets, but you've probably heard things like the fast food market, the used car market, and so all that refers to are the buyers and sellers of that particular item. Let's talk just a little bit about how basic economics works. So you may be asking yourself, what determines the value of an item or a service, Mr. Mueller? Why is one thing $5 and another thing $500? Well, when we look at economics, primarily value is driven by supply and demand, which very, very basically is how much of something there is versus how many people want it. And so this nice little chart is going to show us a little bit how that works. Whereas the quantity, the amount of something is going to go up, the price of it is actually going to go down with demand. So prices are set in this free market idea almost like an auction. So let's imagine, I wish you guys were here for this, that I have one cookie and there are 30 hungry students. Therefore, I only have to sell one cookie to the highest bidder. So I'd ask, who will give me $1 for this? Who will give me $2? Who will give me $3? And more than one student is certainly going to want this cookie. We call that scarcity. Scarce, there's not enough. And so they will bid against each other, which is going to drive up my price. So whenever we look at supply and demand, there are really 3 outcomes that we're looking for. Either there's not a lot of the product and a lot of people want it, low supply, high demand, and that's simply just going to raise your prices. Precious metals is a great example of this. Gold, because there is not as much of it as people want, and so the price of it is going to go up. Another possible outcome is high supply, a lot of a product, but low demand for it. People really aren't buying it. The outcome of that is usually lower prices. And you guys know this well because almost every time you go into any store, there's always a sale, right? 3-for-1 sale. So let's say I had 100 cookies for you guys and I had to get each of you to buy 3. I would probably say, hey, 3 for the price of 1, and you guys loving that deal would probably then buy the product. The third possible outcome is where supply actually is going to meet demand for a product. We'll get into this later in the year, but this is called the equilibrium price. And when you look at things like tamales or sodas, you notice that pretty much wherever you go, they're about the same price. And so that's because there are as many tamales as people want, and so the price of them is going to be very, very stable. And so those are kind of the 3 outcomes when we're looking at supply and demand. So let's talk about a little bit about what makes the American economy the American economy. So a big piece of America's economics beliefs are in this idea called the free market. Now, you probably heard a lot of people talk about free market, and so for our class, here's our definition. It is a market in which prices are set by supply and demand, and individuals make free consumer choices, including where they will work. So the free market is characterized by economic freedom, the fact that most property is owned privately and not owned by the government. The idea that you can choose your job, you can choose your work, open competition between businesses like, Pepsi and Coke, or Apple, and Google, or whatever it is now, among individuals and businesses. And so the key of this is competition. Everyone in the society is competing against each other for limited wealth and limited resources. Another big thing is no price controls. The government does not actually set the price of any product, and so if I wanted to charge $1,000 for a cookie, there really would be nobody that could stop me. And so minimal government interference, not a lot of rules, not a lot of government ownership is going to be big in this system. But just because you're in capitalism doesn't mean that you're going to get rich. There's always risk. In a free market, businesses will succeed or fail on their own based upon the choices that they make. And so the idea of the free market is that we all organically choose to create, buy, and sell the products that we have. So piggybacking on free markets is a really important idea in America called free enterprise. And free enterprise is very, very simple. It is the freedom of any individual to start a business and own private property. If you ever watch the show Shark Tank, it really features people who are entrepreneurs. They have their own businesses, they're starting them, they're trying to get investors. And as you walk around the neighborhood, you see a lot of people out there working various jobs, businesses, selling things. They are entrepreneurs. Free enterprise, you are free to own your own business. So now we gotta get into some definitions because you guys don't know that much about capitalism and American economy. So we'll start with this idea called capital. So capital is going to be one of the most important concepts to understand, so make sure that you get it. So capital is money or assets. Assets are just things with value, used in a business to create more wealth. That's the key. Wealth is when you consume something. Capital is when you create more wealth. And so capital can be a lot of things. Capital can be cash, it can be raw materials like wood or gold, it can be machines that you use to create products, it could also be finished products that you are selling to people in general. So the best way to get this is to think about an example. So let's think about an example. So wealth versus capital. Stuff is wealth when consumed. For instance, if I have $20, I buy $20 worth of candy and I eat it, that $20 was wealth, and I consumed it and I enjoyed consuming it. But now I want to use this as capital. I want to use my money to make more money. If you ever heard you got to spend money to make money, that is the whole idea of capitalism. So I'm going to take that same $20, buy that same $20 worth of candy, but rather than eat it, I am going to mark it up at a couple of cents more, and I'm going to sell that candy for $30, making a $10 profit. Because I have used my assets, in this case cash, to make more money, it went from being wealth to capital. And so if I gave you some money in order to go and buy $20 worth of candy to sell it on the street, I would be a capital investor. I would be giving you money on the hopes that you could make more money with it. And so capital, very, very important. You are not just consuming your stuff, you are trying to use your stuff to make more. And so capitalism is an economic system based on the idea of capital. So a couple of key characteristics to capitalism that may be a bit confusing, so be sure to post any questions you have to the team. Firstly, private property is going to be the core of this idea, that almost all property is owned by individual citizens and not by the government. This is going to be the opposite of socialism, in which large parts of the economy is owned and run by the government itself. So capitalism has three key characteristics that'll help us understand it. Firstly is the goal. What are you trying to do in capitalism? And the goal is to get as much capital as you can. We call that accumulation. It's to get as much as you can. You get as much wealth and money as you can, and then you use it to make even more money with almost no limits. It's no surprise that capitalist systems have produced some of the wealthiest people in world history, J.D. Rockefeller, Bill Gates, because they are constantly able to use the wealth that they make to make even more money. The second key is the production distribution of wealth controlled by the market mechanism. Just go ahead and stop there for a second, and we'll get into market mechanism a little later. So thirdly, we talked about that a little bit already, is the limited role in the government really trying to control wealth and economic activity. And so these three characteristics are what are going to make up capitalism. So let's talk about what capitalism does. The first key thing of capitalism is that it is expansive. It is always getting bigger until, there is really no limit here. Because as you're pursuing more wealth, more capital, you're always going to try to grow. A big business always makes more money than a small business, right? And so people are always trying to make new products, make them better, make more money. New flavors of chips is a great example of this. You have, your new cell phone models. And so because of this, capitalism is a system that drives change. And if you don't change in capitalism, then you will probably be left behind and your company will go bankrupt. And so innovation is really what drives this system. New markets, new industries, new opportunities, because the idea is that it is never quite enough in capitalism. So let's talk about how all this works. Point number 2, the market mechanism. So the market mechanism is an interesting idea that I need you to think about for a second. There is nobody in America that is making sure that you have enough food to eat, water to drink, or any of the other things that you want. Tomorrow, there could be no more hot chips and they could never come back. No one is making sure that we have enough stuff. Yet we have enough stuff. And so this is a phenomenon that's called the market mechanism, that an economy can work with nobody really in charge running it. There's no pharaoh that's ordering that you grow corn and build pyramids. And so essentially the economy is a car. We're all in the back seat. Car is going 1,000 miles per hour, and no one is at the driver's seat, except there's this invisible hand that is on the wheel. The reason that we get all the stuff that we need, and sometimes more, is because of profit motive and competition. Profit motive is pretty simple. You guys want stuff. You want shoes, or you want wings, or you want something, and so you have to get money in order to get it. That's called profit motive. You guys may work so that you can have a little bit extra cash so you can go out or buy that pair of jeans, and so that really motivates everyone. I teach because I love it, but I would not teach if I was not getting paid, right? Profit motive. And then the second thing you know very well, competition. Multiple businesses always competing for your dollar. There are a ton of pizza places. There are a ton of wing spots. There are different flavors of soda. And so competition means that you, the consumer, are actually going to get a choice when it comes to purchasing a product. Kind of nice. And so let's think about this a little bit and just like a little scenario here. And so let's talk about tamales. So you want a tamale this morning, but there's no one making sure they're made. So how come there are just always tamales, and how come they're always $1.25? Well, one is demand for the product. As you roll down Cermak or 18th Street, there are a lot of people out selling because there's great demand for the product. And wherever there's demand for a product, someone somewhere will find a way to get you that product and to sell it to you at a nice markup. So that's the profit motive. You've even seen this with people, selling hand sanitizer out of the back of their cars. And so as long as you buy tamales, there will always be someone on the corner selling them. If people stop buying tamales, they will disappear, as have so many chip flavors and soda flavors and businesses that have not survived. So let's talk about competition then. So tamales are always $1.25. And for that matter, so are sodas, candies, other things like that. And the reason that these prices are pretty much the same is because of competition. You have a lot of choices of where you are going to get your tamales. And so they all have to compete for your money. You vote for the business that you like with your dollar. It's your vote. And so to win your dollar, the businesses are going to do a lot of stuff to try to convince you to shop at their place. They can lower prices. If somebody came out with tamales for $1, I bet a lot of people would switch to that person. You could also improve the quality of the product. You could make more flavorings, whatever else, or you could innovate new products. Great example of this is like iOS versus Android, always coming out with a new product in order to stay ahead of your competition. And so great examples of this, store brands. A lot of store brands are actually made at the same manufacturing as brand names, but they're lower prices because they don't have the brand name. They have to get you to buy the product. Improved quality. Domino's Pizza used to be garbage, but then they changed it in order to try to compete and beat Pizza Hut. And so when we look at this, strangely, profit motive and competition do work, and they do kind of push the boundaries of what we have, always making sure we have enough and always making sure we have something new. And so market mechanism, just in sum, we get what we demand in newer and better ways. Products are going to be sold at a competitive price, products are going to be improved over time, and new products are going to be created. And so the market mechanism is the way that we make sure that you have everything you need, most things you want, and far more than you deserve in this economy. So the last key characteristic of American capitalism is going to be this: the separation of the government and the economy. And the best way to think about this is just thinking about who owns stuff. If we think about two marvels of the world, the Sears Tower and I guess it's Willis Tower now, and the pyramids. In ancient Egypt, the pharaoh controlled property, forced everybody to work, and built the pyramid as a part of the government, pretty much. In Chicago, Sears Tower was built without the government. It was built by capitalist investors who built it from the ground up. And so this is an example of what can be accomplished by these private corporations. Now, one key thing of this is that separating the government and the economy.
Good afternoon.
So now the drawback of this, though, is that without someone kind of overlooking the economy, some bad outcomes can also happen. And so when we talk about limited role for government in the economy, we call this in the business laissez-faire. Laissez-faire! You can say it a bunch. If we were here, you'd laugh. And this means leave alone, let do, hands off. And it's essentially the idea that businesses should compete with each other without any interference from the government. And so the government in capitalism, they set the rules of the game. Contract laws and enforcement, you got your basic health, safety, minimum wage. But in this economy, majority of wealth is owned by private citizens and not the government. Decisions about the economy are majority made by individual citizens and not by the government, such as where you will work is a very important decision. But the big criticism of this, as you can see from that political cartoon, is that just because you can make money off of it doesn't necessarily mean it is in the best interest of everyone. So a big debate we have in America is how unrestricted should this business actually be? And so there's a lot of sources of conflict, and one really good example is this. Let's say that I discover a cure for cancer or a treatment for cancer. I spend years, millions of dollars to develop it. Shouldn't my company, because I researched it and own this medicine, shouldn't I be able to charge whatever price I want for it, even if people need it to live? It's a heck of a question, right? And this one actually played out in real world. There was a medicine called Daraprim that in 2009 was $1 a dose. By 2014, it jumped up to 13.5. And then in 2015, the peak price was $750 a dose. And this is something that a lot of people said it was necessary to live. But could the government actually step in? Should the government step in and get involved and say what a business can and can't do with its prices? And what would it mean if the government did start setting the price of everything in the economy? And so even an example like medicines that are developed by private companies and not like universities or the government really kind of makes us think about, well, how is the system actually going to play out in real life? And that's going to be one of our biggest debates in this class, is how much should that economy really be free? And so our economic fights, they're going to spill over into politics, labor movements, movements for minimum wage, boycotts, all sorts of different things, because the number one issue on most people's minds is always economics. How am I going to put a roof over my head, food on my table, and clothes on my back? And so these fights over American capitalism are going to be hugely, hugely pivotal in shaping the country the way it is today. And so, folks, when we talk about economic freedom, the government doesn't plan an economy or control resources. You, the private citizen, own property, but there are a heck of a lot of conflicts between the public interest and the private interest.
Good afternoon.
So folks, now it's time for you to go on to your OneNote and to check out the economics portion of the social sciences activity packet that we will go over in virtual class. Have a great rest of your day.